this Q&A series is part of an ongoing Q&A series that Farmwell is doing, and this week's topic is on indoor plants. So what I'm going to do is just do this presentation, which is specifically about aroids, aroid plants. It'll just be a basic 101 on what are aroids and some popular aroid indoor plants. And then we can go to the Q&A and answer any questions about indoor plants or aroids or plant biology in general. So yeah. So firstly, what is an aroid? They're plants from the Aroids family, and the reason that I've chosen to do this week's indoor plant presentation on them is they're actually amongst most of the most popular indoor plants, especially here in Melbourne, but probably around the rest of the world. So a lot of the plants that, if you've got some indoor plants, you've probably got some, otherwise you've probably seen them in someone else's house. Monsteras, devil's ivies, alocasias, peace lilies, all philodendrons, ZZ plants. The list really goes on. It's a really, really large family of plants, and they actually naturally occur on every continent in the world except for Antarctica. And they're, yeah, really, really popular indoor plants for a lot of reasons, a couple of which I'll mention. And they're also, in terms of plants that look the best and the prettiest plants and the ones that you probably see on social media the most, there's a good chance that they're aroids. Aroids are typically characterized by being low light plants, which is the main reason why they are so popular as indoor plants. They don't necessarily like low light. In fact, there aren't many plants that like low light, but what makes aroids really good for indoor plants is they can tolerate low light and they can survive in low light, which is not the case for most plants in the world. So they're low light plants, and that's because most of them occur on forest floors. So they're used to being under a dense canopy and climbing up for sunlight usually. They have really big, dark leaves most of the time. And again, that's because they're seeking as much light as possible. They're all herbaceous perennials. So what that means is they're not woody plants like trees or like fruit trees. They're herbaceous, so they're soft stemmed and soft tissued all the way around. And they're perennials, meaning they can grow year after year after year. Aroid plants typically have spadixes as flowers, which is another characteristic unique to them. And a spadix, it looks like the picture that you can see there on the slide, which is a peace lily flower. The spadix itself is the bit in the middle, which is actually like a stem, I guess, or it's called a spadix, which is covered with many, many flowers. Sometimes they're monoecious, meaning that there's male and female flowers on the one spade, and then other plants in the Aroids family are dioecious, so they have male and female flowers, which are completely separate. And typically spadixes have this spathe around them, which is that white part you can see in the picture. It's like a protective sheath around the flower. And another really, really cool characteristic is that some of them, not many, but some can generate their own heat, which is actually really, really rare in plants. They store energy, sugars in their roots, in bulbs or in tubers, and then if they need to, and quite often it's to attract flies and pollinators to the flower, or because they're trying to survive in a really, really cold environment like where there's snow, they'll actually use some of those sugars to generate heat around that flower, which is really, really cool. It's probably something you'll never see if you've got these plants indoors, but yeah, something pretty special about that family. They're really, really good indoor plants because of their low light requirement. And they also, even though often they come from very humid environments or environments that have unique temperatures, typically aroids are really adaptable. They don't need high temperatures to strive. They don't need low temperatures to avoid being burnt. They can take pretty much what we as humans find the most comfortable in terms of indoor temperature and humidity. Aroids are pretty happy with that. So that's another reason they do well indoors. And then the other main reason is they're really quite beautiful, and there's many, many varieties. A lot of varieties of each plant occurring in the wild, but now there's also many cultivars that have been bred by plant breeders, and quite often they're bred for either unique physical characteristics, like leaf shapes or really large leaves, or really unique climbing characteristics. They're also bred for variegation, and the plant market up the high range of plants, so plants where you pay between $1,000 and $10,000 for a cutting. Most of the time, those will be aroids, usually philodendrons or monsteras or similar, which have a very rare or unique variegation to them. And that variegation is basically a variety of color in the leaves or the stem. So you can see it in the pictures there. There's two variegated leaves. They have white coloring in the leaves, or in the case of the plants on the right picture, they have like a white or a lighter green color. That's variegation, which people really like, especially plant collectors. And the other reason they're really good for indoors is they're easily propagated in water. So they're great for a beginner gardener if you're just getting started in propagating. They're great if you're one of those plant collectors that spends thousands of dollars on your cuttings, because you know you can probably, if it survives, you can propagate it yourself pretty easily just in water or another really moisture dense growing medium. That's another reason they're really popular. So I'll talk about a few really popular ones. The biggest one, I think, is the monstera. This is almost everyone who has an indoor plant, they have a monstera. They're really popular, really easy to propagate. And once you've got a really big monstera plant, it's popping out new leaves everywhere, popping out new aerial roots, which I'll talk about in a moment, everywhere. And basically, yeah, there's an absolute cinch to propagate and to sell, and you can get them in many different forms and many different variegated forms. And they also have a fruit, which I only learned this last year. Monsteras have an edible fruit. It's really unlikely if you're growing your monstera indoors that you would ever get a fruit. But if you have it outdoors, which is their preferred environment, they can grow these fruits. And you really have to wait till they're ripe, and it's usually better to wait until they're overripe, because if you eat them unripe, they're really rich in toxins, really rich in stuff that will give you a nasty tummy ache. If you wait till it's ripe enough, then you can eat the fruit pretty much like it is in the picture, just take bites out of it, or you can snap off those little pieces and eat them. And I've never tasted one, but apparently they have a nice, like a pineapple-y and apple-y type flavor. Monsteras are a really good plant to see the difference in aroids between how they do outside and how they do inside. Like I said, aroids usually do fine inside. Doesn't mean they're in their preferred environment. If they're inside, they get a little bit leggy, I guess. Maybe that's not the right word, but they have long, thin stems often, and they have leaves that grow on really long, thin petioles. And that's because they're seeking more light, and they don't have enough light to photosynthesize to get more energy to make more leaves. They also have smaller amount of soil to live in their pot usually, and that means they have less water and less nutrients. Enough for them to survive and to keep growing. Certainly not like having it growing in the ground outside. And if you've ever seen a monstera outside in someone's backyard, it's pretty popular here in Melbourne, even though it's a bit colder than their natural environment where they're from. The leaves are usually ginormous, way bigger than indoor plants. They've often got a lot more holes in them. Those holes are called fenestrations, like windows. And the stems are thicker, they shoot out way more roots. So this is typical of most of the aroids. If you have like a philodendron or a devil's ivy growing outside, the leaves are bigger, the plant looks healthier and much bushier, and then inside you end up with these characteristics which are, I guess, probably preferred for something that's ornamental. Another really popular one is devil's ivy, and it's for similar reasons. You can get it variegated, it grows really well indoors, and it's really easy to propagate in water. And just like monsteras, these guys have aerial roots, so roots that stick out from the stems and they hang right there in the air. What they usually do in the wild is they're seeking something to grab onto. So in the wild, as these plants grow from the forest floor, they want to get higher and higher so they can get closer to the light. So they stick these roots out, and if they can find a tree or a branch or anything to grab onto, then that root will attach itself to the tree, and the plant will know that's the way to go, and it will start climbing up. And the other reason is they can also go straight down into the soil to access more water and nutrients and send them straight to the newer parts of the stem rather than having to work their way up from the base of the plant. So yeah, devil's ivy, another really, really popular one. This is, when I first started propagating plants, it was with devil's ivy. They're really easy to propagate. You just snip them, put them in water, and then they grow really well. And another thing about devil's ivy is they're often called pothos. That's more of an American name, but some people refer to it as that. Philodendrons, there's over 1,000 different varieties of philodendron. They grow on many continents, and there are many, many cultivars. They're a really cool plant. And again, these are a collector's favorite. Sometimes there are two philodendrons that, if just on first look, you wouldn't think they're anywhere near related. The leaves come in all different shapes and sizes. The colors are very different. Leaf surfaces, they can be furry or smooth or waxy. Philodendrons, there are some that grow pretty much in desert conditions, others that practically grow in swamps, and everything in between. So yeah, again, like if you know what characteristics to look for in terms of the flowers, the way the stems grow, the way the leaves grow, the aerial roots, things like that, then you can notice that they are actually quite similar plants. They just look very, very different, especially when it comes to the leaves. In these pictures, you can see there's three really popular kinds. Philodendron micans on the left. That's got a nice furry surface and really light like main veins on the leaves, and dark interveinal patches on the leaves. So it's got that cool color. Philodendron Xanadu in the middle, and then the last one I actually can't remember. Philodendron something. This is a really cool philodendron that I've got that I just wanted to show. It's got this kind of, I think it's bizarre. It's a hairy stemmed philodendron. It's Philodendron squamiferum, and it grows these stems, which if you look at that middle picture, that's a very new leaf, which is just starting to unfurl. The stem has these really soft white hairs all over it. And they're actually quite fleshy. They're not hairy like fur on plants. And the stem is quite red. And then you can look at that same center photo and you can see below that is a stem which is way more mature. It's quite older. That's actually lost all of its red color. The hairs are much bigger and thicker and more spread out. And then if you look at the stem which is positioned above that little red stem in the photo, that's one which is halfway between. That's the second most recent, I shouldn't say stem, it's actually a leaf petiole. And so it's kind of transitioning from red to green, and those hairs are getting a bit bigger, a bit more spaced apart. I don't know yet, I'm sure I could look it up. I don't know yet why they do this, whether there's an evolutionary benefit to it. But it's just something really, really cool. And my favorite part is to actually just touch it, just run my fingers along and touch it all the time. Another really popular one is the Monstera dancini. It looks like a devil's ivy, so it looks like it's from that same group of plants, but it's actually a Monstera. And what's really popular about these is those fenestrations in the leaves. This one has the common name Swiss cheese plant, obviously because of the holes. And this is another one which is actually quite easy to propagate. And if you ever have it, something cool to do is let it climb up a wall or a post. The roots are really, really good at attaching to things. So Monstera roots don't really glue themselves to things. They like to kind of grow into things. Monstera dancini, so I was talking about Monstera deliciosa. Monstera dancini, as soon as those roots are touching a surface, they'll actually attach, and they attach really, really strongly. So if you've got one, it's a fun one to let it climb around, as long as you're not worried about a few little marks on the wall. You can paint them over when you take the plant down. This is a Monstera dancini, which I wanted to make a point about how different characteristics and different growing mediums can affect the plant. On the left is a large Monstera plant, which I bought when it was a lot smaller from a nursery, and have since, I grew it in water for a while and then put it in a larger pot and gave it a post to climb up. Those leaves are quite big, probably maybe 30% bigger than my hand. And they have really, really large windows, really, really thin parts of the leaf, I guess, which are all joined up. And it's climbing really, really happily, and every new leaf is bigger than the next. And I attribute that to, one, it's in a really, really light-filled room. And also, when I first started, it was growing under a grow light. So it's never been desperate for light, meaning it doesn't need to grow thicker leaf surface area to capture more light. And the other reason is it's in a really, really good growing medium. It's a really big pot, so it's got plenty of space for the roots to be happy. The picture on the right is a plant which I took a cutting from the picture from the plant on the left. And the cutting had a leaf the same size as these big ones on the left, but the plant that ended up growing, the leaves are much smaller. Those leaves are actually more like maybe half the size of a phone screen. The windows in proportion to the leaves is slightly smaller. There's a bit more flesh area. The stem is thinner, and the plant is also really, really trying its best to climb away. And the reason is it's in a darker room. That's all it is. It's in a darker room, and probably another contributor is it's a small pot. But the primary reason is it has a little bit less light. It's still happy, still growing. It still looks great. But because it's in lower light, it needs a bit more energy. One, to have thicker leaf, more leaf surface area, capture more sunlight. And two, it's really seeking to go elsewhere because it's thinking, okay, if I'm not getting quite enough light here, I can get it somewhere else. And it's probably thinking it's going to reach out to a wall or a tree and climb up to the sun, basically. So what I need to do is keep moving it, make sure it doesn't attach itself to any walls that I need to keep in pristine condition. Alocasias, another really popular one. These are really, in terms of that word herbaceous, herbaceous perennials, these are a really good example. They are really fleshy, really soft and fleshy. And if you grabbed an alocasia leaf, it really wouldn't be hard to just snap it right off, and you'd see how full of moisture those stems are. Again, there's many different varieties. They have a lot of different colors. People sometimes call them giant taro plants or elephant ear plants. They're mostly from Southeast Asia, so Thailand, Laos, places like that. And they do all right in backyards in Melbourne. They do better in New South Wales, Queensland, where it's a bit warmer and a bit more humid. But they are happy indoors, and they're another really popular indoor plant because of the really big light green leaves. They look really, really nice. Alocasias grow really, really readily in water, and they take up nutrients quite rapidly. Some plants are nutrient sensitive, so if you've ever grown veggies, you would know that if you pour too much fertilizer on, then they have an excess of nutrients, can actually burn them. Alocasias don't really experience this. And we have some at Farm Wall, and this is an example of one which we bought in a pot and we put it into one of the Farm Wall ecosystem setups, so in a fish tank, and you can see it there. It's just in clay balls and then growing right into the fish tank water. That photo was taken soon after it was put in, and then the other photo was taken about 40 days later. Hard to tell, but it's got about 3 or 4 new massive leaves. It's grown immensely. The stem is pretty much about to break out of the pot. And there's 2 reasons for this. One, the fish water is really, really full of nutrients already. Alocasias grow really happily in water. And 2, we've put some of our indoor plant food into the water, just as a test to see how the plants that are growing in there would benefit, and how the fish would do with it with slightly more nutrient dense water. And the alocasia's gone out of control. So that was a really, really good proof of concept to our indoor plant food being able to be used in water. And we've just been blown away by how quickly this alocasia has exploded in growth. And it's actually, Geert sent me a new picture today with another new leaf. And I'm pretty sure that the newest one before that only came out last week. So again, this one is really popular. It's actually quite different to most aroid plants, and I didn't know until recently that this was also an aroid. It's a ZZ plant. It's often called Zanzibar gem, or a similar name to that. As the name suggests, it comes from what used to be called Zanzibar and the surrounding countries, so Central and South Africa. And it grows in dry conditions, does really, really well in dry soil. If you ever get one, contrary to other aroids, you can actually get away with never watering these. They get all the moisture they need from the atmosphere. and it's really easy to overwater them. They have bulbs under the ground which really struggle in soil that's moist for too long. Yeah, that's another example of just how broad this family is, and even though they share a lot of characteristics, they can be quite different. That's just a picture showing the ZZ plant and those bulbs that I mentioned. You can see there in the water. That's it. So there's a picture of me with my collection, and I put that in there, one, because I'm kind of vain, but two, because there's actually quite a lot of aroids in that photo. Probably 50, maybe 60% of my collection is aroid plants, and that's primarily because I've found them really easy to propagate. So that's it. That concludes the presentation, and now we can move to the Q&A part of this seminar. So feel free to unmute and ask any questions, as long as they're not too tough. If it's dead silence, I'll assume my presentation was flawless and you've learned everything you need to learn.
It was.
Oh,
I'm
thanks.
just blown away by all the plants in that room.
Yeah. Look, it's some people say it's a hobby, some people say it's a problem.
Passion, maybe?
Yeah, a passion. It's certainly, common downsides are the cost and the pests, but like I said, I really like propagating, and I've had a farm wall ecosystem since about June last year, and that's been a real handy propagation tool, having plant cuttings that I put in the tank there. So the picture is filled up by a lot of spider plants. I've propagated all of those in the fish tank, and then quite a few monsteras as well, which I've propagated cuttings in the fish tank. Yeah.
Oh, well, I must give you a canwa.
Sorry, what was that?
A canwa. How do you spell it? K-A-N-G-W-A-H, I think. A canwa.
I've got to say, I've never even heard of that.
Oh, it's not an indoor plant. It grows outside. It's a tropical thing. And I think it was in, what was that? Something Crazy Rich Asians. It flowers. It has these big flowers, and they open once, and they're huge and white, let off a perfume, and then they're dead by the next morning.
Wow.
And I took off a leaf, and I've got what do you call them? Roots, little veins growing on the bottom of it. So I can bring it here, and you can pick it up.
The plant itself looks ugly, but
yeah, the plant's ugly.
The flowers look lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, definitely. It's I've never even heard of it. I'll Google it later. I mean, after this, and I'll have a look. Yeah, sounds very cool. So are those roots, are they aerial roots coming out of the stem?
No, you plant them.
No, the plant, but there are some aerial roots. Well, email me when you're coming this way, and then I'll bring it in the morning.
Yeah, so sounds good. That'd be fantastic. Yeah, it'd be a neat thing to.
It's an outdoor plant, though. I mean, I don't have it indoors, but.
Yeah, I'm in an apartment, but we do have the farm, and also we have a bit of space around the office where we can grow things outside. So I'm sure we'll find a good spot for us. That's awesome. Yeah.
Okay, well, just email me the day before you're passing us here at work, and I'll bring it in.
Yeah, sure thing. That would be great. Thanks.
Pleasure.
I guess if there's no more questions or comments, or anyone's got a plant they want to share as well, that could be something we do. But yeah, if there's no more questions for now, then I'll just say thank you for joining me, and I really appreciate having people in these presentations, and as always, they're recorded and it will be uploaded to the ecosystem. But yeah, all the best for the next few days, and we're running this presentation again on Thursday. So yeah, it's nice to see everyone. Thanks.